Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, we stock up our larders at a new Burmese opening.
Always had Burmese food around me growing up. Went through various different sort of ideas over the years in my head, and then it sort of came to me or dawned on me that I've got this heritage, this Burmese heritage and passion for the cuisine, and it just seemed like an obvious choice to go down that line.
Also on the programme, we meet the Finnish brewers bringing artisanal beer to fine dining.
Each beer was custom-made to suit each dish, with the brewer and the chef working together to get the flavor combination just right.
Plus, we visit a bookshop and kitchen dedicated to cookbooks in New York City. All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. Much of the cuisine of Southeast Asia has become well-known and popular for both high-end restaurants and down-to-earth eateries, but the food of Myanmar still remains relatively unexplored. Dan Anton decided to change that when he first opened Lahpet as a food truck and later a pop-up in London's East End in 2017. Since then, as the appetite for Burmese fare has continued to grow, he's set up bricks-and-mortar spots together with head chef Zo Mahesh in Shoreditch, the West End, and most recently in Burmese. But there's a spin on the new space. Other than presenting the restaurant's signature updated take on Burmese classics, Lahpet Larder also offers a series of ingredients and goodies packaged and ready to be bought and experimented with at home. I sat down with Dan in the studio to talk about the road that took him here and where he plans to expand next.
My dad's half Burmese, so I grew up eating my grandma's and my auntie's Burmese food. He moved here in the 60s, just before the military came in, so he's barely British these days, but always had Burmese food around me growing up. I was a recruiter for about 10 years, and I've always had food around me, but got a bee in my bonnet about wanting to open up some sort of food business, and went through various different sort of ideas over the years in my head, and then it sort of came to me or dawned on me that I've got this heritage, this Burmese heritage and passion for the cuisine, and it just seemed like an obvious choice to go down that line. I did a business plan, went to see some investors, and they said, well, it might be a good idea, but, what have you done about it? You haven't executed anything yet. You've just got this idea. And so you better go and do something and maybe come back to us when you have. And so the most obvious route was to go down the market stall at the weekends and get a pitch, which would allow me to keep my day job and my earnings coming in. So we set up at Mulberry Street Market in Burmese, which is where we've just opened our third site. And did a year down there, so just cooking at home on a Saturday, and then hire a little car and drive it all down to the market, and got going there. Got some press, got in Time Out and Snippet in the Standard, and started to taking off a little bit, getting some recognition for offering something new, a new Southeast Asian cuisine, untapped, shall we say. And then I realised that if I wanted to take it to the next level and get out the market and sort of aim for bricks and mortar, I'd have to find a chef. So that's when I found Zo. So I think I spent the last quarter of my year in recruitment trying to recruit Burmese chefs on the sly. So, yeah.
Convenient.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah. So found out that there was an Asian takeaway down in Herne Hill that was doing Burmese dishes, and it closed down. But I found out, if they're doing Burmese dishes, there must be someone Burmese in the kitchen. So, and there was Zo. I think I spammed him left, right and centre on social medias, and get a message across to him, as I didn't have his telephone number. But anyway, we started, having a few beers together and sort of took off from there. He joined us, and then we found our first pop-up site in London Fields. We both quit our jobs, took the leap. Did a year in London Fields, quite a well-known area for pop-ups. I think Somsa, the Thai restaurant, originated there, and some other food-led concepts. And then moved to our first bricks and mortar in Shoreditch in 2018. A couple of years there, got hit by COVID, came back from COVID, opened up one in the West End, and then most recently, just third one in Burmese.
So this, I think, is very exciting because I remember coming to Lahpet in London Fields when it had just opened, and it really did feel like It was the first time I had Burmese food myself, and I think for lots of people in London it was the same thing. I wonder how much your cuisine has evolved since then. How has Lahpet evolved during this time? What is different in this third iteration? And do you think that the Burmese scene in London and beyond has also changed alongside you? Or are you still kind of the flag bearers for now?
I think we are sadly still the flag bearers, and we're not really territorial because there's so much room in the market for more Burmese food businesses and restaurants to exist. It would be good to have more, but just doesn't seem to be anyone on our heels at the moment. Other part to your question, I guess, we've always taken a sort of modern spin on the cuisine. So not, bastardizing it in any way, but serving it in a modern way, using modern cooking methods to make the dishes in our kitchens, and trying to sort of stay ahead of the curve. If Burmese cuisine follows, the same route as Thai or, Vietnamese, and what you see what some of the chefs out there these days are doing with those cuisines, we want to grow and help Burmese food proliferate across the Western world, specifically in the UK at the moment. But the first 2-3 sites really followed a similar type of menu, but we thought this time we'd create a slight spin-off from the Lahpet brand. And as we were moving to Burmese for our third site, and Burmese is historically known as the Larder of London, with its location close to the Thames and imports and whatnot, we thought we'd call it Lahpet Larder. So spinning it off and creating an in-house larder with Burmese imported products, so pickled tea, pickled ginger, the beans, the things you just can't get in the UK, which are really quite hard to recreate, plus a load of sort of in-house ingredients and products that we make, like tamarind sauce, chili jams, things like that.
Well, talking about the food itself, I had a veritable feast when I visited. And I find it really interesting that it seems to me that there are so many different influences. So, I had a spread in front of me and there were certain things that reminded me of certain cuisines and other things that reminded me of others. And I wonder how important the regionality is in Burmese cuisine, because there are so many borders, so many influences coming in, such a complicated and variegated history. How does this all translate into the food that's on the menu?
There are staple dishes in Myanmar, which you'll find everywhere, such as mohinga, which is a fish noodle soup, tea leaf salad, ginger salad, pork curry, beef curry, that sort of thing. They exist everywhere, but then there are regional variations of those dishes, and you said it's down to geography and those areas of the country, those states within the country, and the borders they have with neighbouring countries. So if you take a mohinga fish soup, there's a style that they do in Yangon, the capital. But then if you go up to, say, Rakhine State, which is nearer to Bangladesh and India, they do a regional version over there with different spicing, more tamarind, more fish paste. They call it something different as well. They call it a moti. Same with other dishes. So if you go up to Kachin State, which borders China, they'll use much more sort of variation of spices and pungent herbs and Szechuan pepper because of the Chinese border. If you go down to Cayenne State, which is down the south, Thai border, there's more flash wok cooking, and more seafood because of its location. They'll use mackerel in the mohinga instead of the river fish, catfish that they use everywhere else in the centre of the country. So there is a huge variation, and so we draw upon that in our menus. So if you go to all 3 of our sites, we'll do a different version of the mohinga. Same with other dishes, Kachin beef we put on the menu. We've got a Rakhine moti in the West End. So just where we can, playing around with regional specialities, but also keeping the staples on the menu.
I wonder, because, again, of the history and the reality of the country, because it was near impossible to go there for such a long time, how much does the impossibility of going there influence both, well, obviously the fact that the cuisine hasn't had a chance to kind of be exported in the same way that perhaps a Thai cuisine has, but also how important is it as an instrument of connection back to Myanmar for your family specifically, but just in general, what does it mean to not be able to go, and how do you connect with it through food?
Well, I think you can go now, but you've got to make sure you're going for the right reasons. So clearly 18 months ago that was different, and now, they're in a state of civil war, but there's only certain areas of the country which are sort of off limits, regional armies and fighting against the junta in certain areas. But when you're going, you're effectively lining the pockets by paying your taxes of a brutal regime, which has never really left power since the 60s when they came in. They took power, the military. But then again, you've got to think that the people do want you back. Tourism is good for these people, and they want you back is what I'm hearing too. So you've got to kind of weigh it up. I haven't gone back yet, but I'd love to. And then going back to the other bit of your question is, no one's really left since the 60s comparatively to, say, Thais leaving Thailand or Vietnamese leaving Vietnam. So that's why the cuisine, I think, hasn't proliferated so much over here. Just lack of Burmese people, Burmese chefs, people who want to open up Burmese food businesses. I don't sadly think that's going to change anytime soon.
For your own family, though, how has food been an instrument of connection to this heritage? Did you hear stories, growing up with the food? What kind of memory would it elicit? Were you privy to these memories as well?
My memories are more sort of sitting down around my grandma's lunch table and sort of eating with my fingers, and my cousins being there and my auntie being there, and a bit of curry here and a bit of pickles there and a bit of balachung there, and and that was in the 80s. So, and they'd already been over here since the 60s. So their memories back to the days when they lived in Rangoon, I don't think really filtered through to me. Although my auntie's just done a book on our family heritage, and it's pictures left, right and centre of the family in their garden in Rangoon eating.
Well, you've expanded quite rapidly. Not that many people can count 3, locations in London alone in just this many years. So surely you must have your eyes set on further expansion. Can you reveal to us what the future holds?
Yeah, I mean, we were still spread amongst this property agent network. So there's constantly sites coming through, and can't even think about it now, but I'm just emerging now from this opening period. So we went to have a look at site in Canary Wharf, which was quite interesting. I mean, Canary Wharf is not really my sort of area, but there's a lot of development going on down there at the moment and a lot of operators moving in, so it could work for us. It wasn't on the radar, but it is now a bit more. So we've got one in East, we've got one in just south of the river, we've got one in central London, so west makes sense. Portobello, Notting Hill, Ladbroke Grove, Westbourne Park, that sort of area. And then north, King's Cross is a target, but no one's really leaving King's Cross and Coal Drop Yard at the moment, so it's a waiting game, I think, and King's Cross is slowly expanding. And then maybe look outside of London. I think that would be a nice spread.
That was Dan Anton of Lahpet speaking to me at Midori House. This is The Menu. Next, we head to Finland to find out about an artisanal beer brewery that wants to elevate the status of beer in the world of fine dining. Based just outside Helsinki, Do Good Brew makes bespoke beers for an array of high-end restaurants both in Finland and abroad. Its founder's perhaps surprising belief is that beer is often more suitable than wine for food pairings, and it can match just as many different flavours. Monocle's Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsov met Do Good Brew's founder Jorma Tikkanen at Craft Beer Helsinki, one of the city's most popular artisanal beer festivals, to hear more.
At festivals like this, the food offering often consists of fatty hamburgers, tacos, hot dogs, and that sort of thing, instead of ambitious and meticulously prepared fine dining dishes. At this year's Craft Beer Helsinki, those who stopped by the stands of Do Good Brewing and the local restaurant Outo were treated to something quite different. Or how does this sound? Butter kombu seaweed paired with an Asian-influenced New England double Indian pale ale, or melon chorizo in yogurt sauce paired with a watermelon and hibiscus gose. Each beer was custom-made to suit each dish, with the brewer and the chef working together to get the flavor combination just right. Later on, when I sat down with Do Good Brewing's founder Jorma Tikkanen, the obvious first question to ask him was about the potential of beer as a food pairing.
I think the potential is actually pretty great. So the wineries have done really great marketing in the past kind of like 300-400 years that they have marketed that the kind of the best drink for really good food is wine. That's not entirely correct. So we can actually pair with a lot of other kind of beverages as well. With beer, the potential is that obviously when everything else is wine, it can become quite dull. So it's kind of like nice to have some kind of like variation that you can have some other drinks as well. Beer is obviously, it's kind of like when done right, we can add flavors of the specific restaurant, even the specific dish, so we can make it even more custom to the restaurant. And especially if we are talking about kind of like bolder flavors, like we are working a lot with Outo restaurant here in Helsinki, a lot of like Asian flavors, a lot of umami. That's really kind of like challenging for red wine or kind of like the kind of traditional pairing. But we do some pretty kind of like innovative beers, sour beers, a lot of like flavoring, and then we can really match the pairing even better than the kind of like the wine would. So for this year, we have brewed a couple of special beers only for this event. So we did a pear kimchi Asian saison. So it's our house saison modified a bit to the kind of Asian side, and then flavored with pear kimchi that Juho from Outo came to our brewery and created. So we juiced the pear kimchi and we added that to the fermentator. And for example, that beer is paired with Juho's amazing soy beef kimchi dish. So there's a lot of similar flavors with the beer and with the food. So as said, kind of that kind of food would be hard to pair with wine, but with specific beer, that's just, it's a match made in heaven.
Since wine is the industry standard when it comes to food pairing, chefs can sometimes feel the need to adjust their dishes in a way that makes them pairable with wine. That's why more and more top chefs are turning to beer and other drinks to pair their dishes with. Do Good Brewing works with several Michelin-starred restaurants in London, Copenhagen, Helsinki and Tallinn, where the brewery works together with the chefs to make the perfect food pairing, beer for each dish.
How the whole kind of like customer process starts is that I go and meet the restaurant. We taste some of our prototypes, some beers that we have created for other restaurants. We try to kind of like give the understanding for the restaurant that what are the capabilities of super custom, super kind of like high quality beer. Then I have a target that after the first meeting they will give us some ideas that what would be their house flavor, what is the kind of main flavoring, what would be the kind of like the spices around it. And then we do a couple of prototypes, and then when we start to kind of figure out that what is the kind of like what is their own style, then we start to actually brew the first pairing beer. And there's a couple of options. So some restaurants, especially when they are new customers, they might give us their menu that this is our up and coming menu. These might be two different dishes that we could kind of like have the kind of beer pairing with. And then me and my co-founder Ilpo, we are kind of figuring out that what could be the flavor, what could be the beer style, and then we are creating it. But normally when we have brewed maybe like 2 or 3 pairing beers for the restaurant, they start to understand the capabilities of beer better, and then it goes more to the way that they give us some kind of like flavorings, they give us some ideas that use these. For example, we did a really great beer for a new restaurant called Hees in Estonia. So Danius asked, the executive chef said that he would want to have a beer with everything pine. So we brewed a beautiful dark saison with pine cones, pine needles and pine bark. When they understand that we can really do whatever, that is, it's not kind of like near to whatever, but it's actually whatever, then they come up with crazy ideas. And obviously for us as a brewery, that's our superpower, that we are now working with 10-15 restaurants through Nordics, and now we have our first customer in UK, which is a 2 Michelin-star restaurant in downtown London. So we are getting ideas from the best flavor creators of this world. So I think that there's no other brewery in the whole world with similar kind of like creative kind of capabilities and power behind them. So that's great.
I just want to get a better understanding of the types of beer that you make. Maybe you can just give our listeners a sort of a preview of the different types of beer that goes. I mean, probably a listener thinks, okay, beer, New England IPA, an IPA, a saison, it goes, whatever. But maybe just give a couple of beers that you have recently made and just sort of flavors that you have in them. I know because I earlier tasted, for example, you had a stout flavor with vanilla and fried garlic, which is definitely something I haven't had before. It was amazing, by the way.
Yeah, so we brewed a lot. So in the last 5 years of product development, we have brewed maybe like 600 prototype batches. So we have done a lot of recipe creation. We have maybe done 200 different recipes, tons of different beer styles. So we do everything, and kind of like our idea is that we don't want to do. Let's say we made a Belgian strong ale. But doing a Belgian strong ale as is, it's kind of like, it doesn't make sense because there's kind of Belgian breweries who have done that for kind of past 1,000 years, so they are pretty good in doing kind of Belgian strongs. But we did one flavored with blackcurrant leaves, and it became beautiful. So we always try to kind of add something. Most of the beers that we have brewed for Michelin restaurant they are saisons, which is French Belgian beer style, and Gose, which is a old German sour beer. Those are good because we can have the right amount of acidity so that the beer tastes great, but at the same time there's a bit of a palate cleanser so that the next bite of the food is even better than without the beer. Some of the flavorings we have done in the past, or near past, we did one it was a prototype for Saw that we did with cloudberries and white chocolate, so they wanted to have a beer with dessert vibe that they want to pair with dessert. We did a super interesting beer flavored with black lime and timut pepper. That was amazing, and the timut pepper is actually interesting because you get a bit of a numbness on your mouth after a sip of beer. That it's it's a bit of a having popping candy for the first time. That you have a sip and then okay, there's tingling feeling in my mouth, what's happening. And for example, that came. The idea came from the chef that he said that he want to have this kind of beer. So as said, it's that's where we get the idea from.
There are over 100 types of beer, and each one of them can be fine-tuned with various hops and spices to suit almost any flavor profile. As the success of Do Good Brewing demonstrates, chefs and restaurateurs should not look down on beer as an accompaniment to great food, and instead see the vast potential that this age-old drink has. From Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsov.
Thanks, Petri. This is The Menu on Monocle Radio. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Monica Lillis.
This week, wine traditionalists were outraged as a video emerged online of customers at a restaurant on the French Riviera pouring several dozens of one of the world's most expensive wines into a bowl to make sangria. The revellers were caught mixing vintages of Petrus wine costing around €120,000 in a glass bowl with ice cubes, orange juice and other ingredients. The Red Bordeaux is widely considered to be the finest wine in the world and was served at the wedding of the late Queen Elizabeth II. A 10-year-old Japanese girl has become the youngest person authorised to prepare fugu pufferfish, a delicacy that can be fatal if its poisonous parts are not removed properly. Karen Tabira passed a test this summer and now holds a licence to slice and gut the fish for consumption. Tabira was among just 60 out of 93 people, mostly professional chefs, to pass the test in her home region of Yamaguchi. And finally, bosses at Campbell's Soup Company, whose cans feature in one of Andy Warhol's most renowned 1960s works, have announced plans to drop the word soup from its name after more than 100 years. Its chief executive, Mark Klaus, said the renaming decision was part of a shift in strategy towards other foods and jarred sauces. The 155-year-old company began producing canned soups in 1897 and is believed to be the first in the US to do so. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Monica. You're listening to The Menu. If you try to trace the history of the cookbook, the likelihood is that you'll encounter the ancient Greek poet Archestratus. The Sicilian-born author is credited with having composed what we now recognise as the first written ode to eating well. But Archestratus's works weren't just recipes, they were also a comic commentary on society at the time, told through the prism of what people cooked and what they ate. Appropriately named in his honour, Archestratus Books and Foods is a bookstore nestled in a corner of Brooklyn, New York. Established in 2015, the beloved neighbourhood institution specialises in cookbooks new and old. But it's also a nicely stocked pantry and a kitchen too, where many of the recipes within the volumes displayed on the shelves are brought to life by owner and chef Paige Lapéry. Monocle's Thomas Lewis paid a visit to Archestratus to meet her and learn more.
So Archestratus is a culinary bookstore and an Italian grocery store. We also make sandwiches, we have coffee, we have tea, we have a pretty lively events program. We have 2 to 3 events every single week of all sorts, like book events and bingo nights and potlucks with the community, and we're a lively, vibrant bookstore.
And we're in the neighbourhood of Greenpoint in
Yes.
Brooklyn. And what kind of sort of environment is that to have a space like this in?
Well, Greenpoint is probably, when we opened 8.5 years ago, we were hearing for years that it was going to be like one of the most sought after populated neighborhoods. And that was starting to happen. And then 5 years in, the pandemic hit. But all these high rises were sitting empty. And now in 2024, we are a very bustling Brooklyn community with a lot of new restaurants and cute little shops. And we're right by the water. We have a great, a lot of people are coming for the food. A lot of great businesses that have just opened are destinations for people coming from Manhattan. So yeah, it's definitely, I would think, one of the most popular Brooklyn neighborhoods right now.
And to go back to who your lovely space is named after, Archestratus.
Yeah.
As I was saying, my ancient Greek is a little bit rusty. Maybe you could tell us who Archestratus
was. Absolutely. So, Archestratus was somebody that I read about in a book by Mary Taylor Samedi, who wrote a book called Pomp and Sustenance about Sicilian food. I'm Sicilian, that's my heritage, so that's my sort of like personal history with food and the type of things that I like to cook. So I read about Archestratus, and he just kind of stuck in my brain. He wrote a book that was possibly one of the first cookbooks ever to be written, called The Life of Luxury. He was Sicilian. He was a little bit wild. He got arrested for debauchery. His book was funny. The fragments that you can read from his book are funny and weird, and I liked that about him. He would say things like, you should go to this town and, not the other for this particular ingredient because, it tastes like shit if you, literally would say, it tastes like shit. You shouldn't go to this town. Or he would say, if they won't sell this to you, if this particular vendor won't sell this to you, you should steal it and face the consequences. And the whole time he's writing in Homeric verse. So he's writing in the same verse as the Iliad. So that in and of itself is the joke. So I just liked him. And I was like, this store to me feels more about, to me, cookbooks are about the voice that's coming through. I'm less interested in skill-based, my personal interest. I'm just less interested in things that are about sort of skills and developing sort of a more technical framework, although I absolutely respect people that have an interest in that, and we have a lot of books like that here. But I think that our approach is more about looking at the world through food. And so we have a fiction section, we have a gender studies section, we're sort of organized like a general bookstore, but the lens is food. I often feel like we cook food, we sit down and we have a conversation, and that's what food is ultimately about. It's kind of this vehicle for living life. So I like things that feel like the food is just incidental to the life that you're already leading, and that it's inseparable, it's inextricable, and when it sort of becomes the focal point, it's a brief moment and it's a beautiful moment, but there's all this other stuff that's happening around it. And I also feel like that relates to sort of how food is an art. I know that sounds like going off the other direction, but when people talk about needing to learn how to use a camera, so then you can be free to enjoy using the camera. And so I feel like if you have a basic understanding of cooking, and if you're have recipes in your repertoire, then you don't have to think about the food. You can just instinctually, and with that, have that knowledge now, and then you can enjoy yourself. You can sit down, you can live your life. And that's, I think, why it's important for everyone to learn to cook, so that they can be able to feed themselves, be able to feed others, and then just move on.
And what's your own path? What led you to opening a space like this?
I always grew up, I had grandparents that had a shop in Bushwick in the 60s and the 70s, and they were very successful. They made ricotta and mozzarella and basket cheese, and when I was little, I'd always ask my dad, Papa, don't tell me a bedtime story, just tell me about the store. I just want to know about the store. So I just kind of always had in my mind that I wanted a space. And then as I grew older, I was completely enamored with reading and books. And then it was okay, I want a bookstore. And then I met my family in Sicily. When I was 19, I fell in love with them. I came back, and the way to feel really close to them for me was cooking Sicilian food and starting to collect Sicilian cookbooks. And there is something like extremely pleasurable about cookbooks and cooking and food, but I also come to it all from like a more artistic side where I want it to feel holistic and like sort of like the whole spectrum of life and cooking. So I worked at McNally Jackson and created sections in their cookbook section that still exists, which I went a little while ago and I was like, oh, that still exists. I was delighted by that. Fantastic. So I just kept working in books, not at all in food.
And this is where the two worlds overlap. And
yeah, all sorts of different aspects of the shop bring all sorts of different people. And I don't feel sort of limited in any way. I think that what I'm really excited about is sort of settling in and just getting better at the thing that we do here, which is we are a bookstore and we are a grocery store and we have an event space. And so I'm just really excited about, by not running the cafe, being able to really like put in the money, put in the time, and just kind of bring to fruition what I've been wanting to do for many years in all of those spaces. And then also I want to write a cookbook. So I would say that's like a new thing in the pipeline, which is that because we had a cafe that people really loved for many years, I have all these recipes, and so I want to write a cookbook.
Thanks, Tomos. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This program was produced by Monica Lillis, and our sound engineers were Lily Austin, Flynn Simons and Mariella Bevan. Thanks for listening, and until next week.
When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some of us more confident than others? Financial Times readers think fearlessly because they're supported by bold and trusted journalism. Start reading today and bring well-informed ideas to the table, from the latest on the pleasures of food to sustainable farming and the future of wine. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.